start out with a question. Raise your hand if you're a father. Keep your hands up. Raise your hand if you're an uncle or a grandfather. Okay? Then you're in the right class. Seriously. I was once asked, because when I was doing youth ministry, I actually had no children, and people were like, well, what makes you think that you're qualified to be a youth minister? And for the longest time, I never had an answer, but then what dawned on me was what I'm going to talk about today, and the fact that all of us, in one form or another, can be a coach or a mentor. And even if you weren't a grandfather or an uncle or a father, you typically work with someone else in some format. And in that scenario itself, you can be a mentor, whether it's at work, whether it's at school, church, wherever. Give you a little bit of history or background of myself. I was brought up in a church who actually applied and implemented this idea of coaching or mentoring. Even while at Bible College in Cincinnati, we were coached and mentored most of the steps of the way. One of the things we were told to do was to do an internship. It was only supposed to be a 3 to 6 month internship. Mine ended up being a year because I loved my mentor so much. Richard Yetton was my mentor and a resource for years afterwards up until he went to be with the Lord. Other thing about me, I've coached baseball. I can't tell you the number of years. I've also coached basketball. In fact, literally just about a month ago, finished up in the JVA coaching my little sons. I have 4 first grader, 5th grader, 6th grader, and a freshman. And my 6th grader is currently in wrestling. I wrestled 1 year, and I've already taught him everything I remember from wrestling. And the kid has surpassed me, which is great. But you can understand my mindset. And where I've learned this comes out of 2 places in the Bible predominantly. One is Deuteronomy 6. It's the great Shema. And in that, we hear Moses telling the Israelites to teach the children and the children's children. You know, if you're walking, teach them. If you're at dinner, teach them. No matter where, there's a setting and a scenario where you can teach. The other actually comes from Luke chapter 10, where we see Jesus has already gathered a group of disciples. He's already taught them some, and then he says, hey, go out 2 by 2 and do it. And then it's not like he leaves them alone. He gathers them back later, and he talks with them about it. And everything you see about Jesus is something that you see about this idea of coaching and mentoring. Well, one of the things about being a coach and a mentor that we have to remember is being a lifelong learner. Dallas Willard, he's a retired professor at USC. He is the first person that I learned this concept of being a lifelong learner. While studying in seminary, realize it or not, our goal should always be to constantly be learning who we are in Jesus, who we are in Christ, and how we, as a learner, can then take what we learn and guess what? Pass it on. You know, whether it's our children who are our first ministry, or it's the people within our congregation or at work, there are always things about our walk and our talk that we can continue to teach. So, raise your hand if you've learned something new within the last year. Be honest. Yeah. It's how we should be. Now, here's the second question. Go with it. Did you pass it on? Why not? I mean, think about that. What holds us back from passing that information on? I'm just a goofy person. I am one, if I learn something or I think of something new, especially if it's something that comes from God, I love to first bounce it off my wife. You know? And she'll either go, yeah, like, I don't think so, or, no, that's neat. That's a neat idea. You know? But either way, it begins this conversation. Well, guess what? I'm learning, she's learning, and I'm not just holding on to some nuggets and leaving it there. You know, it was given to me this concept. If a vaccine was found that could cure cancer, wouldn't it be silly if that person just held on to it? No, the first person that's going to find that's going to want to go, hey, guess what? I found it, I figured it out. And then get it out. And that's how we should be when it comes to Jesus. When it comes to anything we learn, we should be willing to pass it on and share it. So, next question for you. What's something new about God you have learned over the last year? Anybody? Anybody learn anything new about God this year? Why not? I mean, think about that. Why not? Is there, even if it's something as simple as God did this, and then share it. You know, for me, one of the things, we just moved. We just moved in August. You know, I picked up wife, 4 boys. You know, 4 boys who were firmly planted in a school setting they had been grown up in. You know, freshmen especially. I mean, think about that. You pack up a kid who's about to be a freshman. You know, and it was just neat how God worked. And after we got here, got settled in, and all of them acclimated beautifully. You know, later on, around Christmas time, I pointed out, I said, hey, James, my oldest, I go, think about this. You probably wouldn't have gotten the role you got in a play he tried out for if he was back in Illinois, where we were at. I said, Micah, look at this. I said, you've already done flag football. You've done basketball. You did wrestling so far. You didn't have those opportunities. You know, I said, look at how God worked in our lives by us being faithful, us trusting. You know, the only people we knew in Wisconsin were my wife's aunt and uncle and her 2 cousins. That's it. They're 45 minutes to an hour away. But we had faith. You know, and we should always be looking for that and encouraging our children, encouraging everybody in our congregations, anybody we meet, to keep learning and grasping who we are with God, what God has done with us, and sharing with it. When you do that, guess what you're doing? Declaring who Jesus is. You're actually spreading the gospel message. You see, you don't have to know all the theology to be a preacher. You don't. The Great Commission. You're doing the Great Commission by just sharing those little things. So as Christ followers, we need to be willing to constantly learn. I had a biology professor in Bible college who pointed out that the moment your body stops learning, in many ways it starts dying. Think about that. It's really true. You stop processing and learning things, mentally, you actually start dying. It's neat because I came from SIU School of Medicine, Department of Neurology, and worked with doctors who did memory loss and aging and Alzheimer's and dementia. And one of the things they actually encourage people to do, read. And not just read the same thing, but read different things. Why? Because they even understood the importance of learning and how you keep growing and staying alive just by learning. So here's a question for you. How can you apply this concept of lifelong learning yourself? What's something you can do? Well, 1, read books. Find books on coaching and mentoring. Go to conferences. Go to training. Don't stop learning about it. When I first started anywhere with anything, one of the things I was taught to do was not to make any significant change within the first year. Why? You honk people off. People leave. Plus, you don't get to know people. Now think about that for a second. How can you be a good coach if you walk in and you start barking orders of what to do? When I started coaching 5th, 6th grade, I put them out there on the court, had them do layups, had them do basic drills. Why? Because I wanted to see what I had, who I had. Do I have a natural leader? Do I have a natural dribbler? Do I have a center? Do I have somebody who can rebound? Do I got a three-point shooter? Because, you know, I can create every play under the sun and create a program, and it's going to fail if I've got 5 guards and no centers. Or if I've got 5 centers and no guards. So what I've got to do is learn each individual kid, each individual person, what their strengths are. And then build them up so that I have not just 5, 6, in our case 10 individuals on this team, but I have a team that know how to work together, communicate. And it's not easy. You know, we would practice every Tuesday, every Thursday for an hour and a half. I was never on the sidelines. Why? Because I wanted them to see that I am equally involved. So I would be out there on the court with them. There were times I'm running up and down the court with 5th and 6th graders. Let me tell you, at 51, 50, almost 52 years old, I was tired at the end of the night. But it was neat because what ends up happening is you get to know every one of your players, their strengths, their weaknesses. So you know who can play well with who can work well with who. And you can put them into scenarios to succeed. And that's one of the things about coaching and mentoring, even within a church setting, that's important. Because if you come into a church setting and it's something new and you're new, get to know people. Get to know who they are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And then you can come behind them and empower them and strengthen them and put them into scenarios where they're more likely to succeed with the gifts and talents God has given them. Because if you just come in and say, hey, we're going to do this, great. You may not have the people and the people with the gifts God has given to do that. And what do? You fail. And then you create an area of failure because you haven't looked at what strengths God has empowered within the church in those people. It is always dangerous to just come in and sweep house without learning who people are, what they do in kingdom work, and how that work affects the community. One of the things when I went to seminary, I had to take a crisis counseling class, and I honestly set in on the class and first thought, I am never going to use a single thing from this thing ever in my life. And guess what? The key number one thing that we were first taught is the thing I still teach to today. ABCs. Achieve contact, boil down the problem, and connect them to a solution. Do you know that works in every scenario? If you walk in somewhere and you decide to not achieve contact with a human, you're not going to know them. So the first thing I try to do anywhere I go is I actually go up to a person, I go, hi, I'm Jimmy. And I ask the person their name. I'm achieving connection, contact. That's how God worked. That's how Jesus worked. Think about that. You know, Jesus shows up and goes, hey, follow me. Hey, Peter, come here. You know, call people by name. Learn people's names. Achieve contact. Then boil down. In counseling, it was boil down the problem. You figure out what the problem is in any scenario. You boil down who that person is, what their gifted and talented is. You know, if you're going to coach, if you're going to mentor, if you're going to do anything, you've got to understand the nuts and bolts of the person, what their passions are, what their gifts are. And then you connect them. You don't just go, hey, I'm going to leave them. No, you go, you know what? You look like you would be good at this. Your passion, the way you always talk, is about this. How about I connect you with so-and-so, because guess what? They're part of this ministry, and I think you would be a great fit. A, B, C. And it works all the time. It works as a coach. You know, when I'm coaching baseball, if I see a kid that's striking out all the time, and I'm pitching to him, I'm going to figure out what the hitch is, what the problem is. And then I'm going to go up to the person, I'm going to say, hey, I'm noticing this. I notice that anytime it's an inside pitch, you're stepping back. You can't do that. You got to stay in there. You know, and we'll work with the person. You know, that's how coaching works. You know, think about this. You have been coached. In every scenario in life, you've been coached. Somebody has done these things with you, whether you realize it or not. The question is, are you going to pass it on? You know, every generation needs another generation to come up. Right? You know, if I want somebody to fill my shoes as a speaker or a preacher, I'm not just going to just pray, God, please bring preachers. No, I'm going to be looking within my congregation and even the young people and trying to find somebody that can preach, that just has this gift. Let me tell you a funny story about myself. When I was in 3rd grade, I spent 2 months in a refrigerator box. Back then, in the 80s, teachers were allowed to do a little more harsher punishment. Okay? So I'm sitting at my desk, and no, I'm not listening to Mrs. Kelly, and Mrs. Kelly knew my mom. I'm talking to this person to the left, that person in front of me, that person, that person, that person, that person, that person, and I don't know how many times Mrs. Kelly had said, Jimmy, be quiet. You're disrupting. Stop. If you don't, you're spending time in a refrigerator box. Sure enough, one Monday, there's a refrigerator box. 3 sides. Trust me, it didn't completely stop me. Okay? Which is why I spent so long. But what I didn't know was Mrs. Kelly noticed something. I'm an outgoing, talkative person. What I also didn't know was she knew some of the people in my church. And so here I am in 3rd, 4th grade, and she's already talking to people about, hey, this kid could be a speaker of sorts. Here I am now.
That's kind of a refrigerator box.
It is. It is. It comes full circle. You know? But it goes back to somebody saw something in me. You know? And fast forward, when I was 7th grade, once again, here's this talkative, ADHD kid who could run around full of energy, and one of the elders and the children's ministers got together, and they're like, you know what? We need somebody like Jimmy who's got energy, and he can be the one that goes out, plays with the kids during VBS. So how about we see if he'll volunteer and he can do the 2- and 3-year-olds. This is when VBS was like 8 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. So guess who did bathroom runs and played with the kids? Me. For a whole week. And I loved it. All because somebody saw something and mentored. From there, an elder goes, hey, I teach 5th and 6th grade Sunday school. You're now a senior in high school. How about you come sit in with me, and then, after after about 2 months, he goes, here's the lesson in 2 weeks. I want you to teach the lesson. I'm going to be here. I'll help. I did. That's coaching and mentoring. But it takes time, it takes patience, a lot of prayer, a lot of encouragement. But it's also intentional. We've got to take the time. We've got to look at those individuals that we come across. We've got to have an open heart, open mind, open spirit. Because sometimes we have an idea, man, that person would be great. And God introduces you to somebody else. Oh, wait a second. Okay, God, I'm noticing. And then take the time and work. One of the things about teaching that I've learned is got to be careful with how you teach. This is hard because one of the things I had to learn when I was in undergrad is the fact that there are 4 main ways people learn. And it's easy and common for us to teach the way we like to learn. Okay? So, I'll run through these real quick. There is seeing, listening, doing, and reading. And one of the things that we were always taught is to do our best anytime you teach to try to use all 4 of those. Some settings just don't allow. But what's neat is the more of those you learn, or the more of those you use, the more likely somebody's going to learn. So, why is that important? Because not everybody learns the same way. Okay? Because you take that, then you factor in the fact that you got people who are left brain, right brain, middle brain. Okay? Then you throw in that there are multiple, and I don't mean this in the psychological standpoint, there are people with multiple personalities. In other words, everybody, you've got introvert, extrovert, middlevert, as I like to put it, because there are people who like to be introverted, but then like to get extroverted at times. Or they're extroverted, and in the process, they become introverted. Okay? And then you've got people who are very type A, right? So you have all these different things, and in a room like this, all of you are different. So how you learn is going to be different. So if I'm going to meet with 3 of you, I can't teach all 3 of you the same way. That's why getting to know each person as an individual is important. Because then I'm going to know, oh, Dave here likes to learn hands-on. So we're going to do a lot more hands-on stuff. Joe here likes to read. We're going to give him books. You know, so don't just do the same thing. One of the other key things that I've learned, 1, give a job description, if possible, even if it's as simple as you're going to take children Sunday mornings from 9 a.m. to 9:45 who are 2 to 8 to the bathroom and back. That's it. But here's the other important thing. Give them an end date. If you're asking for volunteers for something, and this is always important, give them an end date. Think about this. How many of you have ever been asked to do something and you weren't given an end date? So does that mean, because I was never given an end date to when I first volunteered to help with the 2 and 3-year-olds, that I'm obligated if First Christian Church in Columbus, Indiana calls me and says, hey Jimmy, I need you to come back and run bathroom duty. See, I wasn't given an end date. And sometimes we make that mistake. We say, hey, I'd like you to volunteer, but we don't give a person an out. You don't say, hey, we only want it from this time to this time. And that's important. Why? 2 reasons. 1, it gives a person an understanding, hey, there is closure. So if I don't like this, I can say something and get out. 2, it gives you, as the coach or mentor, an opportunity to evaluate. And that's important. Sometimes you got to evaluate yourself. Sometimes you got to evaluate your player. Find what's good, what's working, what's not working, and then work on it. Now, when you start coaching, and I know that sounds easy. That's actually not a quick, easy process, because you got to watch them, you got to encourage them, you got to empower them. And if there isn't success to be found in a person, don't beat yourself up. That's okay. Because sometimes if you don't see somebody as you're coaching them in something, making steps, sometimes it's a good chance to reevaluate and ask questions about what's going on, because maybe there's something going on in that individual's life that they need to address, that they need to work on. And you may help them overcome something that you didn't even realize you were going to be helping with. But guess what you just did? You just coached them through how to work through life. Then, maybe at that point, you can go on. And sometimes, you might be handing them off to somebody else who may coach them further in that area. Other thing that's important that I've learned is always be a resource. Anytime you're working through and working with somebody, don't just stop. You know, if your time of coaching is done, and you see the kid or you see a person and they off the street or wherever, don't just go, I don't know you, kind of thing. You know, say hi, check up on them. Because you never know. Like for me, like I told you at the beginning, Richard Yetton was my mentor. I can't tell you the number of times in my first 14 years of ministry, I would email or call Richard up, even if I was in Illinois and he was still in Indiana, and go, hey, this is what's going on. What do you suggest? Never did I get crickets. I always got a response. And it was always valuable and usable information. So always be a resource. Because think about this. If you're a parent, if you're an uncle, at some point in time, your child or your nephew, your niece might come to you with a question. And how you respond, how you react, how you go through that scenario with them might lead to something more. To give you a great example, I have a 26-year-old nephew who, he's not a Christian. But it's very neat because he knows what I do. And he respects me greatly. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a vehicle riding with him somewhere, and I'll go, hey, how's this church thing going? Guess what? He just opened the door for me and him to have a conversation about Jesus. And every time he gets one. And never has he said, okay, I've had enough. I still get to coach. And it's neat because he's the one, you know, he was, out of the 2 nephews I have, he would be the one I would consider the more honoring one, okay? He's the more coachable kid out of the 2. He is the one I can, just one-on-one, he will call me or email me or text me if he's got a question, especially about faith. Because I keep that door open. And the other one, it's not that I don't, it's just that's not where he's at. But he knows, and he knows he can come to me. And we can always be that way for anybody within the church, within our home, no matter what kind of scenario of being a coach or mentor, we can always be a resource till the day we die. It's important to be. The other thing that we have to do is not stop. You see, sometimes we think, hey, I've just finished with this individual, whew, I want to take a break. Well, that break can last a lifetime. sometimes it's good, maybe take a week or two. But in the meantime, to keep asking and keep looking, who's the next one? You know, who's the next one up? Because that's important. You know, constantly in ministry, that's one thing I'm always looking at is, okay, like in my situation right now, it's like, I wonder who could be an elder in our congregation. You know, I wonder if this person could do this. You know, I'm always looking at the next one, no matter what the age group is. You know, and it's kind of neat because, just give you an example, John, who's here, he's pastor that I got to take over from. He asked one time about having somebody run just as simple. We have a system called Proclaim. It's like PowerPoint for a funeral he was going to do over the weekend. I said, you know what? My 6th grader can do that. Micah. Volunteered him. I volunteered my son. He didn't, you know, I told him, but I volunteered because I know that's one of the things he likes to do. He just finished in 5th grade in Illinois doing this whole year of how to do presentations on the computer. And he was like, he spent, I can't tell you how many minutes showing us on our TVs, like, hey, this is this one that I did, and this is this one I did. So I knew he was going to say yes, and he did. Guess what? He's now on the schedule. We just got here August 26th. He's on the schedule, and once a month, he runs Proclaim in our service. Why is that important? Well, I just found somebody that's young. Well, guess what that just did? I can't tell you the number of 5th graders who have asked our children's minister, when's it my turn to be up there like Michael is? That's what you want. You see, when you coach, and you coach well, and you do it right, you know what you bring? Excitement. You bring this attitude of, hey, when's it my turn? Can I do that? And what that does is that brings partnership, that brings fellowship, that brings growth in the kingdom. Last thing, it's like shampoo. Wash, rinse, repeat, right? You've seen that on the bottle. It's the idea. Continue the process. I suggest for anybody, don't do any more than 10 or 12 people if you're going to work. Me personally, I only like working with 2 or 3 individuals because then I get to do some really in-depth things with those people. And honestly, one of those men is in here right now. I'm not going to say his name, but what he doesn't realize is how I started it was I go, hey, I would like to send you a scripture verse every day during the week, just to encourage you. And then if there's something that comes up you need prayer about, send me a text. That's how I started it. Do you know what's so difficult about that? All he has to do is say no. Right? There's nothing difficult. And it's no hard feelings. If the guy says, well, no, because I already do that with this person. Great. You know what I just learned? He's being coached. He's being mentored. I don't need, but I can tell him, hey, if you still need anything, let me know. And you're still that resource. You're still available. But you keep wash, rinse, and repeat. So guess what I've been doing now? Since I work with 2, my brain's working on, well, I wonder who my next 2 are going to be. Because I don't stop. And that, to me, is why coaching is so important, and especially in the church setting. Because we are called to be disciples, followers of Jesus. But more importantly, we're not just to be learners of Jesus, but learners of Jesus that teach others how to learn about Jesus. You know, one of the greatest things I think we can really teach anyone, especially in this generation, have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, right?
Yes.
But how many times do we teach our generation or any generation how to get back up, how to confess, how to repent, and how to get back into it? We don't. You know, I'm about to preach here in a couple weeks about confessing your sins to one another. I looked up videos on this. Like, I wonder how many Christian videos, how many songs there are about this. Do you know what I found? Since 2012, 2. Before then, there were 4 that I knew of. How sad is that? That there's no major reason, there's no major books on how to encourage people to be able to confess things to one another. And that's the other reason why I think it's important to coach. Because one of the things I teach my kids when I coach them in any sport, great that you know how to win. You need to know how to lose. Because your attitude, your heart, when you lose is equally as important as when you win. Because sometimes the greatest growth comes from when you learn from your mistakes in your